how much of your building process comes from who you are? You know, like I enjoyed like when I was talking to you about doing this interview, and I was just like, "Hey, how you doing?" And you're like very honest about how you're doing, and like, "Oh no, things are bad right now. Like, come back to me at a better time." And I was like, "Oh yes, you know what? I should be able to do that." How much are you doing that? Like throughout, how does it influence everything that you do, and the work that you do?
That's a good question. I think a lot. To some degree, like I would say maybe even to a fault, because I'm so hyper aware now, right? Of like how I'm feeling, what's influencing my mental well-being, how much has it detracted from or added to my productivity. So I'm often in my head and about that stuff, but then it's also where I'm building. So it can become all consuming, actually,
Yeah.
because, if I think about like, there's this, relationship, very meaningful relationship between the state of well-being and your productivity. So like if I'm sharing with you, Mash, that I'm not doing so well, I automatically know that like productivity gains are going to be zero this week. Like, so it's almost become inextricably linked. And I was actually just thinking about it yesterday. Coincidentally, was the anniversary of a friend's passing, and he died by suicide, and that was a large part of why I started building what I'm building. And so you see how it doesn't kind of go away. Like it influences a lot of things.
Was that the starting point? Just like losing someone in that way, and then realizing that this was a bigger problem that you wanted to solve?
Yeah, for sure. I think, sure, there may have been other nudges, because before that, I myself in that same month, and actually a few of my friends had been struggling with like their emotional and mental well-being, coincidentally. And then at that time, like mine was a culmination of a lot of work stress. And then I was put off work for a couple of weeks. And in that same time, this happened. So it was kind of like just this smorgasbord of things happening at the same time. And like you said, yeah, I was like, it was almost like it happened simultaneously, but it was more the straw that broke the camel's back. Like, okay, like what is this? What's happening in this particular space? Is it an experience unique to just me? Like, is it an experience that's unique to just a certain group of people? And then that's where the curiosity sparked. I hadn't initially thought like, oh, I'm starting, I'm going to find the solution and build a business. It was more around curiosity, like asking probing questions and then like going down research rabbit holes. Yeah.
What does it look like to even begin to build a solution for something like this, right? Like, it's not a simple thing. It's a very important thing. And mental health has become such a very, very, I think it's more central to culture now than it was before. I think our parents' generation, mental health was not their business.
No.
Yeah. How you're feeling, what you're going through should not influence, your output. I think that's their generation, whereas maybe we are a lot more conscious, a lot more. I still think that there could be more, but like, how do you even begin to? What does that exploration to build a solution even look like? You're mentioning research and like asking questions.
Good question. I'm trying to take myself back. So I started questioning and experiencing mental health, my mental health deteriorating in that space. And I was, on leave and so it had a lot to do with like self-interrogation first. Like no one was really 2018, yeah, no one was really talking about it, and it wasn't as socialized into like the language and pop culture and that, because it was pre-COVID. So I asked a lot of questions around like, what am I experiencing? how is it affecting me? Like, how am I going to get help? What kind of help? And so those were personal questions. Then it kind of expanded to people within my sphere of influence. Like, hey, have you ever felt like you're having an anxiety attack? Or like, have you ever felt? And then it became, okay, let's look at how big or how big of a problem it is. A lot of the questioning and exploration was also like, you know, when I encountered how big of a problem it was, even then, like, you know, it's not like mental health has been something that just like, you know, suddenly became meaningful enough to, but it's always been there. I was like, are people even going to care? Because it's been a problem, you know, and there hasn't been a sense of urgency, as far as I understand, at a significant enough scale to address the problem. So then the questioning around like, are people even going to care if they haven't cared before, you know, and therefore is it a worthwhile problem to solve then? It's very complex, right? Because my initial hypothesis was then like, okay, forget about all that noise. Like, if it is a problem, I've now decided it's meaningful enough to solve. And then I had this very high, you know, hypothesis around, I experienced therapy for the first time in that space. And then I was like, everybody should have access to therapy. Like, this has been transformative for me. So how do I make that process as frictionless as possible? And that was how I thought, you know, you solve the mental health problem. And then obviously over time, you then begin to realize that there's layers, so many layers. And the thing you thought you were solving for may not be the thing necessarily that you're solving for in the way you thought you were going to solve it. And I often say, like, I joke around with my friends who are building in different spaces, like, man, I wish I had started like a business that was like, I don't know, like cement, you know, because like you need cement to build walls. Everybody can see that. Without cement, there are no walls, you know, and this, you know, not to take away from the business of cement making. I'm sure it's very complex and all those things, but it's like, we can all agree on the need for cement and what the world would look like without cement and why we should pay for cement. Mental health is different. It's like, you know, if I invest in somebody's mental health, what would the payback look like? How long would it look like? Like, how long would it take for me to get that payback or that ROI? There's so many questions.
What's the ROI on good mental health?
Yeah, what's the ROI?
Sure.
And then in the beginning, I was not thinking about ROI of mental health. I was thinking people are literally dying. You know, I just lost my friend to suicide. So I'm like, so how can we stop people from dying? You know, at a very baseline level. And then it became more nuanced along the way. You know, like, what does it mean to be mentally healthy in the first place? So defining that and untangling that is still a work in progress, you know, and differentiating between the benefactors of, you know, good mental health versus the people who then pay for that versus the people who ultimately benefit. Man, I just think about the cement a lot. I think about the cement a lot.
Sure. What does especially talking about cement, what does the practical process of building out a solution look like for Amari?
Yeah. So it's interestingly, I started it with the hypothesis that it would be a purely B2C model. So I want to connect people to mental health care help. It looks like connecting people to, this was my hypothesis, therapists. Great. Let me speak to a bunch of therapists. Let me convince them that, you know, I'm trying to build this thing. Can I put them in my network? Great. Excel, Google sheet done. Then I went and said, okay, who's going to pay for this? Like, who needs it? Who's going to pay for it? And like, what could that look like? And in that process of research and ideating, I actually shared with somebody that happened to ultimately be our first client what I was trying to build. And he was like, hey, I think we could really use that for our people. And that's how it started. So it wasn't like a conventional path. Like, he actually convinced me that what I'm trying to do is fine as it is. Like, I was like, but I just have an Excel spreadsheet and a bunch of therapists. And he was totally cool with it. And so what I ended up doing was I ended up connecting people to trauma counselors. So people that had experienced some sort of meaningful trauma around, or trauma is valid, around car accidents, whatever, and then connecting them via phone call with my therapist on the back end, taking a margin, fine. And then I realized that, okay, there's value in this B2B style model, because these, the organizational leader was willing to pay for this so that the people who benefit for free, and he saw value in that. Fast forward a couple of years later, now it's a fully fledged with confidence, because relative to that Google spreadsheet, it's a online platform, and we've got screening tools across different dimensions: physical wellness, financial wellness, and the like, and mental wellness. Organizations can tap into that dashboard that we've built to see in real time what the state of their organizational health is across those different metrics.
Yeah.
And then over and above that, we connect people, if needed, to various experts, not just therapists, but also doctors. Because what we realized was that mental health doesn't exist in a vacuum. And if you are, struggling with your physical health, there's a high chance that there could be mental health impacts. And we researched that a little bit more to find that there's a strong bidirectional relationship between mental and physical health. So why not capitalize on that? What I also learned was people were building different solutions for like team wellness in different spaces. So physical, financial, mental, which is cool. But leaders were saying, we just want something that we can just like a holistic model. And so we're at a very exciting time where we're tracking those metrics like in tandem with one another. And hopefully over time, we'll have enough of a meaningful data set to say like, these are the relationships between these areas of wellness across your team. This is how much you can save if you invest in these different areas of wellness. And really moving away from this like checkbox exercise of like, okay, we have this wellness program, and more like you actually can see the tangible benefit. People are healthier, like there's a reduced risk of diabetes, because man, it's just what it was and what it is now are very different things. But I had to start with the base, the fundamentals of like, how do you connect people to help? Now it's like, how do you empower organizational leaders and decision makers with the tools to make data-driven decisions on how to optimize their team's well-being, which is a mouthful, but it's like, that's an evolution from where it was before.
Sure. And I always think like at the beginning, and I've said this a lot on the podcast, it's like that beginning process of ideating around a solution almost feels like playing, exploring, testing, creating, and then like you go on a journey to get to this eventual place you are at now, which is amazing. You switched from saying mental health to using more wellness. Can you talk about what organizational wellness is? And, we'll talk about your journey just like on that ideation, because that's just amazing. But yeah, what's organizational wellness versus just that mental health focus?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I think many people will debate on what that looks like. Some people will say it's like the bottom line, that organization's wellness is how much we're making per revenue per person, which to some degree is true, depending on which hat you're wearing. But we're also looking at how productive people are. So, if it takes me 5 hours to do something and somebody else an hour, and we're doing the same thing, like how productive are we relative to one another? It's also showing, how often people are showing up to work, right? So a lot of the statistics say that like it costs organizations anything from between 20 and 30 lost productive days when people are not mentally sound or mentally healthy. And that's tangible, like that's real money, We're talking about also how engaged people are, and a lot of, HR and people leaders will have a whole host of metrics that they would use. But those are the three things I would mainly focus on: productivity, whether people are actually even showing up for work, when they are showing up for work, what's their state of being, and I think how engaged they are, And I think what's interesting about where we're at is those things are not easy to measure, right? Mental health was never necessarily easy to measure to begin with. But like when you talk about wellness and these intangible things, a lot of the time they're not very easy to measure. So we spend a lot of time figuring out how to build models to make people see and what the impact is if they don't invest in wellness, organizational wellness, and what potential cost savings they can glean from that. And I think everybody will have different definitions of what organizational wellness looks like, of course. But for us, and for what we've experienced with the teams we've worked with, those are the main things, right? And then all those things culminate into the bottom line, which is a story that isn't the easiest to sell to leaders. But I'm glad that people are becoming more awake to this, again, bi-directional relationship between how engaged are people versus how much money the organization is making. So yeah, I'm really glad that we're shifting mindsets in that way.
Yeah. You switch from that B2C, which is just like, we've got therapists, you need therapists, come find them, to what I think is more a wellness marketplace across, mental, financial, all of those things as well. What would you say is, the differences in running a business when you're going B2C versus B2B, but also how do you, I don't want to say sell the story, but how do you help organizations understand the impact of investing in their people like this?
Yeah. So maybe I'll answer backwards.
Yeah.
So we spend a lot of time trying to figure that out. How do we show people the impact? And, leaders are also held to certain standards and expectations by their investors or their boards of directors. And so it's valid. What is the ROI of me investing in this tool that is supposedly going to help my teams be more productive? So we have things like calculators where you can input different variables. So let's say your average team cost or whatever the case may be. And we kind of show a indicative view of how much you're losing by not investing in mental health, or in the affirmative, how much you could save, or whatever the case may be. So we do a lot of ideating around tools. Why we also introduced screening, and that's not just screening, you do a screen at the beginning and then it's done, at regular intervals. So prompting and nudging people to do a wellness screen or whatever the case may be, is because our goal is to say at time 0, your overall wellness score was X, and then at time whatever, your wellness score was Y. This is the net difference that we've been able to achieve in this time period. And then we attach some sort of indicative value to that. And I say indicative because I am of the view that even those benefits are estimated, right? Those are quantifiable benefits, which are important, but there are a lot of qualitative things that matter as well. The only reason we harp on about the quantitative things is because that's what gets you the sign up from the organizational leaders, and that's what gets you buy-in from the people that make the decision around investing in employee well-being. But let's not forget that there are also qualitative benefits, right? What was the first part again?
How do you navigate as a founder for B2C versus B2B?
How do I navigate? That's a really good question. I've always had a heart for B2C because of the inception story, right? I would think what if he had an app that could connect him to help in crisis? How would the picture have changed? Not going through going to the HR and, signing up for an EAP, you know what I mean? So my heart, that's the heart of the B2C story. But then shifting to this B2B model is like, okay, maybe I won't have that like immediate feel good kind of connection and the like, but I can scale. And instead of necessarily impacting that one life, if I can impact one organization of a team of 100 employees, that's impact at scale, which is great. But what it also means is like the convincing, right? Model is different. So like I said, we spoke about the ROI and the projections and the predictive analytics, like all these, I would say sexy things where like, if I'm speaking human to human and I'm saying, hey, like, are you okay? Like, do you want to feel better? But here's the catch. If you can't afford that, then you can't afford it. And that's completely now isolated you from the solution.
Yeah.
But if somebody can pay for it, then that's great. And more people can get access to it. I think having to package things in a very specific, I would almost say like sexy way, because you just need to package things. So your packaging game has to be great, especially because you're not selling something that people can see. And so that is a kind of different model. And I also think we all talk about sales cycles. It requires not just packaging, but like, you start with an initial conversation. This is what the product looks like. This is how you could benefit. People are skeptical because it's not an instant benefit and it's an intangible to start. So then how do you think about becoming a thought leader in the space? And that's how we then, we forayed into creating YouTube videos of like different aspects of wellness, the way we write content, and because we want to position ourselves as a thought leader. You mentioned things about like, doing interviews and the like, which I'll table. But because you realize, that's a good start. You want them to trust that what you're saying is true and other people have validated that it's true. The credibility game is super important when you're selling to corporates as well. I think for me, when I make purchasing decisions, sometimes I can make impulsive decisions based on the fact that it looked nice, But if I'm selling to a business, you've got to come through with your, credibility in the space. Why are you well positioned to be the one to offer it? Yes, why is it costing this when somebody else is, so there's a little bit of a different dynamic. And the sales cycles are long. Yeah. My sales cycles. I don't know. I mean, I'd love to get to, but they're really long. Like you can be talking to a potential client about this for a year. And then at, month 12, they're finally keen to get, so nurturing that relationship and that lead is something I hadn't conceptualized doing when I first started.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How differently do you need to approach building your business when you have so much purpose at the center? You clearly care about it. You care about the problem. It's a personal problem. But there's the practicals of a sustainable business, of trying to scale something. And I hear you already just like explaining some of those things where you're navigating the realities of building something sustainable that can still drive impact. Can you talk about what that journey is like?
Oh, that's a good question. I'll start with saying I was a solo founder for really long. So that in and of itself, I think, made things, I don't know if challenging is the right word. Yes, it is challenging being a solo founder, but I didn't always have someone to check my blind spots. So like I'm solving for this very personal nexus thing that is like, and I have a very kind of specific way I'm thinking about it. It matters so much to me that if I probably had a lot of blind spots that somebody else who perhaps wasn't personally connected to the problem could check me on. Like, okay, I'm glad that you feel this way about solving for mental health, but have you thought about this? Until I and then as I started, getting advisors and getting people into the fold, it's helped me almost be faster to release my agenda on how I think. I had a very specific way of thinking because I'm so, personally invested in solving the problem. Now, because of these relatively more objective influences, I can release my agenda a bit more. But it is tough to toggle that line because it can really, adversely, positively, yes, because if I didn't care about what I was solving for, I would have quit long ago, to the extent that I care about it. So that's positive. But then also there are blind spots that it's probably, made me vulnerable to. So I've been very intentional about surrounding myself, even as I was building as a solo founder, with community and testing things with people, because I already knew that I was going to be vulnerable to like being too one-dimensional and thinking about, it. But what it also does is I'm almost obsessed with thinking about how to solve the problem because it's so, deeply connected to my personal experience. So I think a lot about it. I do a lot of research, and all these things, which I think is a good thing to some degree. I'm hardly ever not thinking about it, to be honest, which my therapist would be like, and that's part of the problem, girl.
And maybe that just brings us into another part of this, which is like, the mental health of you as a founder. Like, what are the realities of that? I think most people, especially when you're building the way you're building, I think people build differently. You clearly have purpose at the center, impact as a focus. Yes, you being very practical about how you measure that impact and making sure that your clients and your partners understand that impact. But it matters to you what you're doing, which means maybe some of yourself is in that business. How do you navigate the difficult times when your business is faltering as a founder? How do you manage your mental health as a founder?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't think I have the playbook, if I'm being completely honest. It's a work in progress. And I think that's part of the journey, because there are moments in which if I am struggling and, or the business is not doing where I wanted it to be or where I needed to be, and it then becomes, it feels like it's a reflection on me and my self-worth and my identity, because like you said, it's become so inextricably linked. And then that just, has this negative impact and this negative effect. But then there are times when, because I'm doing research, I'm in therapy, I go to coaching, like all the things, I try to practice what I preach, because I don't always, succeed. Where I can quickly kind of get out of the loop, because I'm like, okay, like we just published a blog post about physical activity and like the impact on, mental health. Like, why am I not running today? So it does have like this kind of symbiotic relationship. There are things that I've realized that are really important. I think it's really important in order to get out of your own head as a founder, it's really important to immerse yourself or tap into communities outside of your founder community as well. Like, community is great. So building can be very lonely. A lot of people speak about that, and that's true. And it's important to get into community where people have shared similar lived experiences. They get it when it's like about to be the 25th and it's salaries. We're all like nervous or whatever. So that's great. Resonance is great. But sometimes it can get you stuck in these thought loops around things that then can take away from your journey and like appreciating yourself as a whole human, right? So what I do as well is, like, on LinkedIn, I take breaks from LinkedIn because, few things can be as triggering as a founder, as consistent stream of people winning, like, winning at fundraising, winning at logging the customers, winning at MRR, win, and if you're in a difficult place, that is not, for me, it's not necessarily the best place to be. So I do schedule breaks, like from spaces like that, or like managing energy is something that's really important. In the beginning of my journey, I thought I must go to all startup awards, networking show, whatever, you name it, proximity to people that make decisions or people in the space. That's great. But it's important to manage your energy. And so I took a break from like these networking events and started asking myself, okay, these are important events, but how do I move through them with more intention? Because even though I may come across as an extrovert and like I really need to recharge, like my social batteries, that I need to take a step back and recharge. And so being more intentional about that, but also, because my algorithm, like on the LinkedIn and on the, in my mailbox, all the newsletters, it's so centered around tech and wellness and entrepreneurship and the places I go. I have been more intentional now about exploring different communities and signing up for different things, because what you can do as a founder or as an entrepreneur is really tie your identity to the thing that you're building so much that, like, when things are going wrong in the business, you're also going wrong. You're also error 404. And that's not really a healthy way to live, because the ebbs and flows are inevitable. And once you've attached it to this like performative, thing, it's not a great place to be. So that's important. And then I think for me also just like spiritual wellness is something that is really important for me to help keep me grounded. I think, it's one of the most difficult things I've ever done is build a business. And in navigating difficult things, my spirit life has really seen me through, for sure.
Sure. I like how you're doing the work on so many different fronts. You're thinking about the physical wellness, just even thinking about doing the running, and you're thinking about the mental wellness, setting your own pace, building your own way. And it's like multiple different ways where you are constantly improving yourself and being better and arming yourself. I've started thinking about it as arming yourself. Maybe not enough entrepreneurs arm themselves in order to go into this thing. You do need to be exceptionally strong for this, I think.
That's so good. I wish someone told me.
Do you think about how you need to build in your own way in order for this to succeed? And what would you say that is? What is Onkgopotse's way of building a business?
Yikes, that's a tough question to ask.
I kept all the hard ones for you.
Thursday. Sure. Okay. So one, I think I'm starting to learn and appreciate that building Onkgopotse's way is going to become my moat. And in some ways, I can see that I can now see, because we're not all coming from the same point of departure. We're not all, we don't have the same kinds of connection to the problem we're solving for. And initially I thought that would potentially be a weakness, because, I'm just like, the way I see the world is so different. And like, how I think of this thing as so important to solve can detract from like the efficiency with which I need to solve it. But as long as my hypothesis is, as long as I remain coachable, as long as I'm, open to feedback, I don't want to lose the essence of how I'm building, and a lot of it is, yes, being malleable, and being Onkgopotse's way is to be malleable and to shift. Like, if I wasn't Onkgopotse, I wouldn't have been open to the idea of shifting to this holistic health model. As Onkgopotse, I'm very open to learning, and I'm very open to being challenged. I mean, it's not always easy, but like, I'm open to that. That's my way of building. Building with a multi kind of dimensional view is also Onkgopotse's way, right? Like, one of the things that's built into Amari is cultural resonance. And it's understanding that mental wellness and wellness in general are also is also inextricably linked to cultural influence, right? Like, and now I'm like going off tangent, but like as someone who's grown, and a lot of Black Africans would also relate to this, as somebody who's grown up in church spaces and the like, I had often seen spaces where people would say, "Oh, just pray it away," like, the Holy Spirit, and that's great. I think spirit life is an important aspect of mental health. But culturally, if it's not harnessed and if it's not positioned correctly, it can be a major detractor from people seeking out help and seeking out mental health support. So that's just like one example, but also language. So that's why we cover, our therapist database covers 9 languages, because that resonance of shared lived experience, and there's certain things that you can't communicate in English if you are as native Zulu speaker, that if you need to communicate them in that way, it already detracts from the therapeutic process. And I think that's just the Onkgopotse's way of building, is like building in these things that perhaps other people didn't necessarily think of as important or useful to build with. And sure, I can get stuck in my own head about these things, but I think they're useful, and I think they will ultimately become the moat that we're all chasing, right?
Sure. Building your way is the ultimate moat. I'm going to use that somewhere. If I tweet it, like, just act as if you never said anything about it.
I'm going to say, citation, please.
What is one thing about being an entrepreneur that has really challenged you the most? How have you seen yourself grow throughout this entire process?
Oh, that's not, you really are not holding back. I'm like, we could be here all day if you keep asking these types of questions. But the evolution, I think one of the things it has done is force me into doing things that I haven't felt ready for. Like, I didn't feel ready for this. I didn't feel ready to start building in tech. Like, I'm not a software engineer. I didn't feel ready to start pitching to investors or to get on stage and pitch. And I constantly have to tell myself that, like, you're not ready, but like, you're ready as you'll ever be at this point in time. It's forced me to stop, which I haven't gotten to that point yet, but to stop trying to over-engineer myself, my solution, to the point of readiness before I put it out into the world. That, I think, was the biggest thing. Like, I think in terms of efficiency gains, if I could go back, I would have, like, somebody just standing next to me and say, "It's ready," like, or click send, or like, go live. Because you can get a person like me who just thinks about all the different angles and the dimensions. You can just get stuck in your own head and want things to be ready as you need them to be. But maybe just, going live is what you need to do so that you can even begin to figure out if this was the right thing to be solving for. I would definitely, if I could go back, figure out a way to be, not to force myself to feel ready all the time, And that for me filters into a lot of the learnings for me. And then also, I would say always on. Like as an entrepreneur, like there's no on off, you're constantly trying to figure something out, or something's broken, or somebody needs to get paid, or, and so I am learning to find boundaries. Like I can't remember, maybe I shouldn't admit this as somebody who's in wellness.
I think it's important that you do.
Like, I can't remember the last time I was like, I'm taking a break. Like, I'm taking a week off. No Amari, no laptop, no, I will say it, like I'll threaten it, but I will be in there somehow, taking a dashboard or whatever the case may be, because your life becomes so inextricably linked with this thing you're building, and there's no one saying, okay, you've done enough for the day. So you have to become that voice for yourself and advocate for your boundaries for yourself. You find yourself as an entrepreneur Sunday, 3 a.m., there's no one's telling you, especially as the founder, there's no one who's like, what about your well-being? You are the advocate of your well-being, along with the rest of your team, to advocate for your team. So I think boundaries, it's taught me to set boundaries.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
What does the next 5 years look like for Amari? If we're here in 5 years, which we will be, what would you...
Sure.
Yeah.
Good question. But one of the first things that is really important for me with Amari is to build an ecosystem of tools, experts, pathways for people to heal and live healthy. And I think for me that there's so many things in that. But one of the things I really want to do is for Amari to be a influential thought leader in the space of culturally competent and inclusive and holistic well-being. And I see that manifesting in different ways, like outside of just the business and the commercialization thereof. There's a ton of research that I now want us to do in terms of like tracking outcomes of the work that we're doing, the interrelationship between physical health, financial wellness, and the like, and publishing that work. I want to have published at least a few meaningful pieces of research. I want for it to become more of a Pan-African solution as well. Amari actually used to be the pocket couch, and it's now Amari. And Amari means courage in Yoruba and Swahili. And that was intentional because the view is that, and the goal is for it to become a Pan-African solution, and with a lot of emphasis on cultural resonance. So yeah, a thought leader in breaking narratives and stereotypes around that, but also in quantifying what is the upside of wellness and well-being. Just many things, but I think those are the two things I think about a lot. I want Amari to be a voice of influence in changing the narrative around how people, especially people of color, especially Africans, think about wellness.
Yeah.
But I also want it to be data driven, while still having heart at the core.
Yeah. What is one thing that you wish that you know now that you wish you knew at the beginning of building Amari?
That's interesting. I wish I knew a lot of things, so I'm trying to filter. Don't start a business when you are about to have a kid.
That is a unique one. I need you to land that plane. And then
No, I mean, look, so I often say, like, I think of Amari. I have a son, he's 5, and he's basically the same age as Amari. And I forayed into this journey before I knew that we were expecting. And maybe like a month later, we found out we were expecting. So to be fair, I didn't know. But that journey has been, we could do a whole episode on that. Because Amari is like my baby as well, because it's like, you don't really know what to do. Everybody tells you how you should do it. But until you're in it, you don't know. And then when you're in it, like as soon as you think you figured it out, something else happens. And like literally parallel experience with parenting. Like everybody thinks and says all these things about how to parent and how to raise children, but you don't know until you're in it. And then when you're in it, you think you've figured out feeding, like you think you've figured out conscious parenting in a certain way, and something else happens. So it's like these two babies, which makes it extra hard, like an already difficult thing, quite difficult. So yeah, I think about that a lot. But I will say that, like, I wouldn't, navigate the path differently, because there's elements of it that I've learned that I carry with my experience as being a mom into my entrepreneurial journey. Like no one multitasks as much as parents. I don't care what anybody else says. And that skill set and that muscle is carried into my entrepreneurial life. And they feed into each other. Like you've got to just learn how to wear the HR hat, wear the CTO hat if you don't have one, wear all these hats. And then as a parent, you've got to wear the nurturer hat, the paying bills hat, the doctor hat. That whole journey. I promise you I'm going to write a book about that. Mark my words.
I've got a title for you.
Really?
Raising a Business.
Oh, snap. Wow. Okay. I mean, are you going to ask for royalties?
No.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Only a pleasure. Thank you.